So many people returning for day 2. We'll give others a few more minutes to join in, and we'll get started a few minutes after 10 o'clock. So hold tight. Day 2 of our UNLV Virtual Summer Institute, the starter toolkit for serving justice impacted students. For those of you that are just joining us today, my name is Sunny Gittens. I use the she, her pronouns, and I'm one of the co-chairs for the UNLV Justice Impacted Task Force. So yesterday, Tony Wallen with Humboldt State University started with a land acknowledgement, and I would actually like to borrow from that and start today by acknowledging and honoring the Indigenous communities of this region and recognize that UNLV is situated on the traditional homelands of Nuevi Southern Paiute people. So we offer gratitude for the land itself, for those who have stewarded it for generations, and for an opportunity to study, learn, work, and be in community with this land. So Tony, I want to thank you for modeling that. It's something that UNLV has made a commitment to doing, and even in this virtual environment is an important thing to continue with that practice. So some quick announcements before we get started. First, this institute is being recorded, and the recordings will be made available after the institute to anyone. Second, go ahead and keep your microphone muted unless you are speaking to the entire group. If you would like to, you're welcome to keep your cameras on. And if you have questions throughout, please enter those into the chat. So I'll be reading them as the presenters are presenting, and we'll share opportunities for those questions to be answered. And I even actually will say, I know after we ended the institute yesterday, I thought of a question that I didn't ask, and others may have as well. So if you already have questions at the start of today and you want to go ahead and put those in the chat, go ahead. And I'll share mine. So after we left yesterday, I was thinking about how a number of the presenters I started talking about, even I think some of them were newly able to launch Project Rebound at their institutions, and talked about doing job searches for full-time professionals. So I think, and then, but also Rutgers and Oregon also talked about your programs and how you have, I think, some full-time staff. So if it makes sense, and I don't want it to be an overriding part of the topic, but if it makes sense as each of you are presenting today, maybe give us some sense of how many full-time staff are working within your programs at your institution, and how do those full-time staff interact with people in like advising centers and career centers and financial aid at your institution? Like, how do those relationships work? That would be useful, or at least a question I ended up with. And if others of you end up with questions, like I said, put those in the chat. And then we did send out the program booklet in advance, and we will post that also in the chat for those of you that might not have received the program booklet. And more materials will be shared towards the end of the Institute. So those are all of my announcements. We have a full schedule today with some really great topics. So I'm actually going to go ahead and turn things back over to our facilitator, Jason Bell, with Project Rebound. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Sunny. We are rolling day 2, huh? We're here. We got a great group of folks again. And today, I think we're going to dig a little deeper into the application of student planning and obtaining those results from students, as well as the futuristic possibility of employment even after college. So all of that stuff is incredibly important to this work as well. And I know the staff will kind of highlight one of the kind of important rebound philosophies of the high touch kind of model that we kind of pride ourselves on. Yeah, we don't push people away. We work with them through the process. And I know in higher education, sometimes some of our lingo and some of our culture we take for granted because after we've been doing it so long, and I even find myself doing it sometimes. But, you know, simple things like, you know, go to the student portal, download the petition for university waiver of this and send it to the registrar's office. That might seem like a kind of a basic kind of a thing to us, but for a person that's just coming back, imagining to a new world, We're talking about download this, form this, register this, waiver this, and register's office and all these different places. Like they're standard for everyone, but sometimes they're not. So part of this work is being patient enough to recognize that. And I think today you'll really get into it. We have some wonderful folks that are going to tackle those different dimensions as well. Doris and Rafa. I mean, Doris taught me everything I know. This is my work sister right here. She taught me everything I know about higher education and the language of transcripts and all this stuff. And you know, she coached me through it for probably 10 years. And I never told her, but I would just go regurgitate that language with the students like I knew it all the time, you know, and she made me look good, whether she knew it or not. But it's important to this process. Rafa, he's the know-it-all man on campus. He's been around that campus for so long. It's important to have a person around you that knows the inner workings of this kind of, you know, the campus culture, I should say, because it pays to know things that a lot of folks don't. And I think today we'll get into, that's the first stage of it. And then we get into the second chance crew. Roberta Fox on a completely different campus has helped so many of our students. Brandon Butler, who's doing that work. And I think he's actually done some research even on Nevada. I know I have to apologize because a lot of our framework is based on California, but I think he's gonna really delight you with some insight on Nevada as well. So without further ado, let's get into that part of the summit. So Doris, Rafa, you wanna kind of make people aware of how the inner workings of this stuff goes?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Rafael Martinez, and they call me Rafa for short. And I'm the academic and career counselor. Well, we actually, Doris and I, actually the whole staff does we wear all the hats, but on paper, my title is the academic and career counselor. And I went to San Francisco State myself. I got a master's in social work there, and I got a bachelor's in Latino studies at San Francisco State. So I'm born and raised in the city. So I went from City College, San Francisco, to San Francisco State, ended up working there in the advising center, career center, student activities. So I've been in a lot of student affairs types jobs. So that's why I have a lot of knowledge and connections there. So yeah, so you want me to just go any further, Jason, or let Doris speak a little bit?
Well, yeah, I guess let Doris, who's going to start on the financial aid, academic advising, and then to pre-admissions, post-admissions?
Yeah, I can definitely get us started, right? In the timeline of the student. Oftentimes, my role requires me to work with the student until they are enrolled at San Francisco State. And then Rafa oftentimes takes over, and because his focus is mainly our continuing Project Rebound students, although we all work with everyone. But let me first introduce myself. So I am Doris Fent. I am a full-time college and career counselor by training. And my special focus, or my expertise at Project Rebound, if you will, is pre-admission advising. I have been working with Project Rebound now for 14 plus years, and in somewhat different roles. Full disclosure, I'm not a formerly incarcerated person, but I consider myself an ally in this really important work. I'm passionate about providing access and support to our formerly incarcerated students. My work as an ally really began as an undergrad student at SF State when me and Dr. Smith, how many of you met yesterday, together developed a program under the leadership of incarcerated men inside of San Quentin State Prison. That was my first exposure to the American prison system, and I haven't stopped learning since. I think a really important ingredient in this work is to really educate yourself about what the system does and doesn't do, because that will help us understand better, especially for those of us who don't have lived experience, what that experience may feel like and how it impacts our students. So after being a SF State student, and this is relevant, is I was hired as a community college outreach coordinator at San Francisco State. So I'm kind of fluent in the community college system as well as the CSU system. And my experience as an outreach person comes in really handy in my work with Project Rebound, because I'm a generalist, so I know a lot about everything at San Francisco State, and I can specialize in the pre-admission advising. It's really helpful to know a lot about your campus, so don't silo. You know, a lot of us know just our area, and we may not know how the rest of the university works. When you work with FI students, it's really important to know a lot, because this is the only way how we can provide what we like to call high touch wraparound services to our students. They have housing needs, they have food needs, they have disability or mental health needs, in addition to academic and professional needs. So now that you know a little bit about myself, I think it's helpful to explain, you know, who are the students that we're working with. So in general, you can think of them as three major groups. We work with our what we call pipeline students. So these are students who may be thinking about higher education, are curious about higher education, but have not made a decision to really pursue a degree. For those students, we're able to provide free baccalaureate level courses at SF State. Project Rebound covers the tuition. And this is how we allow our students to test drive higher education, to test some assumptions that they may have about higher education, but also test assumptions that they may have about themselves. Many of our students think they're not college material. That's the message that they have been receiving over years. And this helps to kind of demystify this whole world of higher education. The second group of students are really truly our prospective students. So these are students who have already completed a significant amount of requirements, are already ready to apply or getting close to applying. And it's important to understand that this group includes incarcerated as well as formerly incarcerated students. So many of our relationships with our students begin while they're still behind the walls, as they reach out via snail mail. And I always like to ask our interns, when was the last time you received a handwritten letter or have written a handwritten letter? And I can tell you right now, most of our students look at me and shake their head because some of them have never received a handwritten letter. So part of our job is to explain the importance of mail, snail mail, how to respect the mail that we receive from students, turn around and answer that. So a lot of our advising actually happens through correspondence as well. And then here we have our current SF State students, that's undergrad and graduate students, but our largest group is indeed undergrad students. And I'm wondering if it's possible for me to do a screen share. Can I do that? I would just show you a little demographics about what a typical Project Rebound student actually looks like. I'm going to try to share my screen. Okie dokie. So demographics. As you can see, the majority of our students identify as male. The average age of our student is 38 years, and 64% of our students are first generation students. So this is in itself already creates a certain perception. So oftentimes our students are adults, they outwardly present as adults, but they have very little knowledge about the higher education system. So part of our work as college counselors and advisors is to help others understand that our students need support. Yes, they look like adult students, but just like every other transfer students, they still need a lot of support when they come to a four-year institution. 68% of our students receive financial aid, and as you can see, 81% of them are admitted as transfers. So if your campus is very freshman heavy, one of the issues that you will be experiencing is that students have fear around a sense of belonging if they're in the classroom with very young students. So part of our job becomes normalizing older students, the experience of older students on our campuses. Our students are a very diverse group. As you can see, over 50% are what we now call BIPOC students. So they identify as Black, Indigenous, or students of color. To give you an example, African-American students or Black students at Project Rebound represent 28% of our students. The general campus, 5.3%. So we have a larger group of students of color in our program. Academics, high-performing students on average a 3.0 or higher. Most of our students are full-time students, and 49%, so almost half of the students already hold associate's degrees as they enter the university. Many of our long-term incarcerated students are part of this group. So it is not unusual for me to see a student who has transcripts from 5 or 6 institutions, upward of 100 plus college units, and 3 or 4 associate's degrees earned. So those students are come well prepared, yet in need of additional support, oftentimes because of lack of access to technology. And then I'd like to draw your attention to our top areas of study here. So you see the top 5 majors. The message here for advisors and counselors, our students major in everything. And when you work with FI students, it's really important to reinforce that message to students, because oftentimes students have operate on the myths of what they can or cannot do with a conviction history. But it's also staff or faculty. So we had some faculty on our campus who discouraged students from applying to a program because they didn't know that students could apply for an occupational license after graduation. So as an example, some of our students, are working RNs now, are licensed therapists or clinical licensed social worker or attorneys. So it's never a clear yes or no, and it's really important that we help our students, if we do not know the answer, help them with the research, what careers are really possible for them. And Roberta will talk more about some of that, that research. So this is basically a little bit of our students. Now that we have an idea of who our students are, I want to talk a little bit about what are some things that we as advisors and counselors should cultivate when working with those students. Jason talked yesterday about how we are solution focused. We are also, I would like to encourage a really strength-based approach to working with our students rather than a deficit-based approach. Oftentimes our students are told all their lives what they cannot do, what they cannot be, where they cannot go. We want to turn this upside down, and we want to focus on what they already bring to the table, what they have done so far, because many of our students are scholars, they're well-read students, and they bring a lot to the campus and to the different programs that they go into. Trust and rapport. You can have all the technological knowledge in the world. You can be a policy expert on your campus. If you do not have the trust and rapport with your students, your message will not land. As a woman, as a white female, I have to be aware that I sometimes represent a person of privilege. That's always in the room with me when I advise, especially students of color. And so trust and rapport and understanding that students sometimes perceive me as the gatekeeper simply because I communicate policy, admission requirements. So sometimes that can cause friction because students perceive me as somebody who's trying to close the door rather than opening it. So it's good to be aware. And then last but not least, be an advocate for your student. I don't think you can be an effective counselor without also advocating for our students, either with the student, on behalf of the student, whether policy, whether small or big issues. But oftentimes we know we are in spaces where students don't have a voice, and it is our responsibility to be the voice for our students. Of course, as a pre-admission counselor, I do have firsthand knowledge about San Francisco State admission policies, but there are other things I need to know, right? What is your application process like? If you've never filled out an application for your own campus, go ahead, do it. And you will learn that that stuff can stump you. Sometimes it's not as intuitive as we like to think, especially if you don't know how technology works, how to do things online. I love asking students when I do presentations in prison, I always ask students, you know, what does the first F in FAFSA stand for? Any guesses?
Free.
Very well, very good, right? So most students will say federal, finance, any of those F's, but oftentimes students don't understand. Finding out whether you can apply and qualify for financial aid, that process is free, is something that we can communicate to students. Other applications, major applications, I'm not sure how your campus is organized, but we have some more competitive majors that require a little bit more preparation. Special programs. In California, we have a thing called Title V. That means all state universities have an educational opportunity program. We have disability resource programs. We heard yesterday from Martine that about 70% of our students have a learning disability. So it's my responsibility as a counselor to create liaisons with those programs. And Rafa will talk a little bit more about what we call the warm handoffs when we work with those programs in order to secure successful experiences for our students on our campus. One thing I've learned when it comes to college admission, just like the legal system, there's a lot of discretion involved. Universities have discretion in who they admit or not admit to your campus. And so many moons ago, Jason and I had a meeting with our director of admissions because we noticed certain barriers and we wanted to have a conversation with our director of admissions about making special exceptions for our students. And we kind of anticipated pushback. And what surprised me at the time was that the director of admissions said to us, sure, no problem. We do it for other student groups. We do that for our athletes all the time. And it kind of like this little light bulb went on in my head. And it's like, well, we're not asking for something special. We're just asking for the same. So some of those special programs that you may have on your campus may already have ways into admission, ways to negotiate admission exceptions that you may need for your FI students. Just to give you a quick overview of some examples that we have negotiated with admissions, deadlines, flexible deadlines for our students are very, very important. So the normal timelines don't often work for our students. And then, you know, for example, applying late to the campus then would require lenience on all other deadlines that are attached to a university application. When the transcripts are due, when the test scores are due, when your AB 540 exemption paperwork is due. Admission requirements, which ones can be waived, especially if you're working with students that are coming from institutions where they may not have access to certain college work that's necessary to enter UNLV. In this context, it's really important to know what are your feeder school campuses, but also what are your feeder institutions? Where's the majority of your currently incarcerated students taking courses, and what courses do they have access to? We have one community college in California that awards associate's degrees to students, but none of the English courses that they offer inside the institution meets an admission requirement for English for the CSU or UC system. That is a barrier. None of these students are eligible while they're incarcerated, and oftentimes the way they find out is when they receive their denial letter, which is a painful experience for many of our students. Accepting an admission offer, that's a mystery to students. They don't understand that once a university offers you admission, you actually have to accept it. We use a lot of jargon. So at SF State, it's AAO. Others use SIR or IRT, or there are many different acronyms for the same thing. Accept your admission. But how do you do that online if you don't have access to a student portal, a laptop, or a smartphone? In case of application denials, we have negotiated what we call a higher level review. If a student gets denied, we will go and fight for that student. We'll write letters of recommendation. We meet with admissions. We vouch for the student. And we have created a trusted relationship with admissions that I would say 9 times out of 10 admissions will listen and go with our recommendation. So there's many different exemptions, and what these may look like really depends on your campus. I know UNLV accepts lower division transfer students, but that means your students would have to be eligible as freshmen as well. In our experience, the majority of our students either did not finish high school, didn't graduate from high school, or didn't have access to college prep courses while in high school. So lower division transfers don't work well at SF State. I anticipate that that could be an issue at UNLV as well if high school work becomes an admission requirement. In closing, before I turn it over to Rafa, I really want to go back to something Jason said yesterday. Project Rebound staff really prides themselves in being examples of what successful reintegration in a college setting really looks like. We really truly passionately believe that higher education is an alternative to incarceration. We also know, as Martine said yesterday, that 95% of all people incarcerated will eventually return to their communities. We call that process reentry. At Project Rebound, we challenge you to go a step further. How many of the people who are reentering also feel like they belong? This is what we call reintegration. There's a qualitative difference between reentering and reintegrating. And at Project Rebound, we believe that higher education is really a successful tool for academic, professional, and social reintegration. And with that, I'll hand it over to my colleague. Rafa will tell you a little bit about his work with continuing students.
Thanks, Doris. Yeah, so once the students have gotten in, and you can see all the challenges they have even doing that, they come to the office. This is when we had our office open. And by the way, our office was like a home base. I think probably the Project Rebound office is probably one of the most visited offices on campus by students, because it was not only a place where they would get the academic and the admissions information, but it was a place that they could come and do their homework, a safe place to come and hang out, come and just meet other students, or just sit there for a few minutes to relax. So that was one of the things that was they really, really appreciate it. Right now with the virus thing, that part has been lost, but we'll get back to that. But they would come in once they're admitted, and now, like Jason had mentioned, okay, well, what classes do I need? You know, I'm a sociology major, so we would look at their student portal, which is called the My Gateway. That's what it's called at San Francisco State. But then we have to show them how to even utilize that. So it's a whole thing. They have to have a password and a username. And so the technology issues start right away for many of them. Many of them were okay, but a lot of them, even that part then. And that's where our interns came in really great, because a lot of times our interns were really tech savvy. I'm not the most tech savvy person in the world. So sometimes even I would get a little bit stuck on some of this stuff. But so they would come in, and we'd get their portal open, look what the admissions office accepted when they got admitted. So it would show at San Francisco State, we call our general education area A, area B, area C. So area A would be the basics, first year English, critical thinking. Let's see, what was the other? Even my mind goes blank right now. There was a couple other ones, and then there was area B, which were the sciences, and then area C, the humanities and arts, area D, the social sciences, and then there was the upper division requirements. So we'd go and see what was accepted, okay, and they'd say, okay, so far you've got your sciences done, but you still need 9 units in, you know, your social science and this and that. So then we would go and I'd show them where those lists were and the descriptions and if there was any prerequisites for any of those classes. So already they're starting to get overwhelmed, just like, oh my God, you know. So, you know, we have to work with them in that. And I don't want to get too technical with all that kind of stuff, but that would come in. And then there was the technical issues. And then there was the things of like financial aid. You know, we had to make sure that, you know, that they were, if they're going to be a full-time student, you have to take a certain, you know, 12 units or more, part-time, you know, 6 units. And then you have to know that if you fall below that threshold, you possibly could owe some money back. And then they get, oh my God, I got to pay back. And so, I mean, it can really get, it overwhelm them. So we have to really be patient. And like Doris had said about the warm handoffs, we know a lot, and especially Doris, between all of us, we know, but we have connections all over the campus. I mean, we don't even claim to know every detail. So financial aid, we've got people over there that we can literally walk them over when we were on campus, rather than just say, go to financial aid. But no, we said, well, let's go. It's almost like literally taken by the hand. We go over to the financial aid office, introduce them to the person that we know that, and it has a good relationship with Project Rebound. And boy, I tell you, those warm handoffs are one of our lifelines, because, and we're getting more and more departments and campuses, departments and schools are starting to know about Project Rebound. A lot of, Project Rebound's been there since '67, but there's still new faculty that come on, and departments don't really know what we do. They've heard of it, but as soon as they know what we're doing and we get a connection there, it's really, really starting to grow now. And Project Rebound is, you mention it now, and there's a good chance people say, oh, I've heard about that program. I'm not quite sure what they do, something with incarcerated, but at least that's a start. And then from there, we can educate them more. So the warm handoffs are a big, big part of what we do. And then our internship program, it's amazing. We probably get more interns than we can actually fit in our little office. Sometimes we have so many people that want to do internships with Project Rebound, which is great, because then we can sometimes pair them off with some of our students to tutor them in technology, or maybe a certain subject and stuff like that. So that's been a great thing. The other part is when we do the technology, I actually even learned some stuff myself. Like we have a thing on our campus called iLearn. I don't know what you use on your campus, but iLearn is our platform where teachers post their assignments, where you upload your paper. You can see the syllabus there. You can have discussions with your class members and stuff like that. And that can be overwhelming for our students. When I was going to state, we didn't use iLearn. So even for me, I had to sort of learn how to do that. And I'm still not an expert on it, but at least I know some of it. But iLearn is another one that sometimes can be frustrating with our students, because, and then right now with the virus, the Zoom thing, can you imagine? So all the stuff we're talking about technology, and all of a sudden here comes, we got to start using Zoom, Google Meets, Teams, and then iLearn's on top of that. So it's become a little bit even more challenging, but it's amazing. We're getting through it. We have, I think 16 of our students graduating this semester or in the summer. And one of our students is the Hood recipient for the School of Behavioral and Social Science, Health and Human Services. Actually, it's Health and Human Services. He's the Hood recipient for the undergrad students. And people say, wow, Project, we have the Hood, the top student of that school for this semester in the undergrad. So we have a lot going on. I could go on with a lot of the details of the actual interactions with the students, but a lot of it's sort of tedious. But as you can see, I get excited talking about it, because Project Rebound is it's like a 1-unit place that we can do pretty much all of it. We may not know every detail, but we have these warm handoffs. We have these connections. Students trust us. That's the other thing. They trust us, that we get relationship with them. And so I'll just leave it at that for right
No,
now.
Rafa, no,
Yeah.
Rafa. See, you can't just leave it at that. See,
Okay.
I know you do some of this stuff like it's like second nature to you. But
Yeah.
what I've noticed in in our teams is with this post-admission work that you really involve yourself in. Like I've seen students come in, frantic about, the opportunity to possibly pick up a minor. There's
Ah.
there's details that go on with that. There, and there's deadlines that go on with that, and possibly doing double majors. And then just applying for graduation, there's deadlines for that. There's fees attached to those deadlines. And people, they don't, if they're not aware of it, they get confused, they can be late, they can miss the opportunity. Registering, there's registration deadlines for priority res versus non, and all of that stuff falls into play. And then the other piece, the exit part about, we get wind of jobs, certain things come to our office all the time, and people like are interested in, they're majoring in this area, internships, different things like that, and how to apply to those, how to package that resume, and not just pull
Right.
something from.
Yeah,
from
so we also, like, we all can do, but I that's one of the things I was doing before I came to Project Rebound, resumes and cover letters, which is really important, because many of our students in their resumes, have gaps because, they were out of commission for a little bit. And so they don't even know how to, like, how am I going to put that I was, away for 10 years and this and that. And we tell them, oh, no, we can work with that, and we get them, and then they feel comfortable. We work with the resumes and cover letters. We work closely with the Career Center, where I used to work also. They come and make presentations. And then we send people over there to their office. We'll go over there with them. So yeah, and the minors, a lot of students have an interest, like they might be a business major, but they also have an interest in, say, history. And they say, I really love history. I said, well, have you taken some history classes? Yeah. Well, let's take a look. A minor is only like a mini degree, might only be maybe half the units that you would need for a major. And they say, wow. So we go look, and many of our students minor, so we get them in minors. Sometimes maybe they didn't do well in a semester, or they took an incomplete or got an F in a class or lower, and they think that's the end of it. We say, no, you can do a grade change. I mean, you have to petition it. We have to talk to the teachers and stuff, but if the teachers agree, you can change your grade, or get incomplete, or maybe a withdrawal. If it was a real bad grade, something came up in your life and you didn't do well. So a lot of our students don't know a lot of these avenues. So like Jason said, yes, there's a lot of detail in the mix, and that's where we have our warm handoffs going on and stuff like that. But yeah, there's as you can see, there's a lot of different things, but our students, but we get them through. Like I say, we got 15, 16 students graduating this semester. And for our percentage of students enrolled, that's a pretty big chunk, and then one of them is going to be the Hood recipient this semester. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff, but we're a one-stop shop, and we know what we don't know or are not sure of all the details. We know where to go and where to bring people to. So we don't just send people and say, oh, just go over there and they'll help you. We take them over there and we introduce people and stuff. So it's a great thing. And plus, I don't know, I wasn't here yesterday, but we provide many other services, food vouchers, BART tickets, all kinds of things, maybe finding housing and all other kinds of things. So we do the academic, but we also supply many other things. So we're like a full one-stop shop.
That's definitely that campus culture piece. That because I don't think they know about BART in Nevada, but
Okay,
that's a Bay Area system, commuting system that's connects all over the Bay. But Sonny, I know you asked us specifically about roles and the different roles and variation. And let me tell you about the history, the evolution of Rebound. That's one thing we did leave off yesterday. And let me tell you, the Rebound at San Francisco State of today, and all the additional 14 campuses, that was not the Rebound of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So let's just be very honest about the fact that the original Rebound started in a mop closet. So don't laugh at us. We had to start from our humble beginnings and grow. And we got in exactly where we fit in at. And we made it work from there. John Irwin made that happen, and the sociology department actually originally took him in to do just that. And the main thing was having that phone line and having an ability to receive mail from the prison system, an address. That's where it all started from, and then it just continued to grow. But now we're fortunate enough because of the growth, and originally from the one campus in 2000 up until 2016, where there was 9 campuses, and then now up to 14. So the California governor stepped in and put rebound into the state budget that allowed us a little more wiggle room to obtain a full-time staff. So we have a full-time director, we have a records and reports manager, we have a office coordinator who handles just the mail specifically. We have Doris, who's pre-admissions and dealing with all that transcript stuff. Now we have Rafa, who's dealing with post-admission stuff. So everyone has these individual roles that allows us to get more and more things done and deal with the influx of students that we have coming, going, students continuing, students coming in, and pipeline students that we're working with. So it doesn't stop, and people are consistently writing, people are consistently being released. So it just changes. We're a full-time program, and everyone has an expertise in different things. So there's a whole outreach component that was, like Rafa alluded to a little bit. We had to really shift gears on during COVID, but we managed it. We offered some virtual town halls. The staff was really patient. Every week getting people, to used to that, because some people, we had a community on that campus. People come to our office to be able to relax and breathe a little bit. And like Dr. Smith mentioned, and some of that stuff we've seen play out in the classroom affects students sometimes. So oftentimes, in addition to all the academic piece, we had to shift into counseling. I mean, sadly, I will tell you on more than one occasion, there were students that were affected by issues that happened in some of those classrooms. And sometimes in the criminal justice, criminal legal field, many professors use the Stanford Prison Experiment as a reason to dialogue about issues that take place in prison dynamics and stuff. But some of those kind of discussions affected our students pretty deeply. And I found like some of the toughest, roughest men come into the office after something like that and completely breaking down. It brought them to a place that they weren't familiar with, and they didn't know what to do with that kind of emotions that it had invoked. But that's okay. It can be a safe space for that as well. And that all became possible because of the growth and different opportunities that we had for over the years from doing the work and being dedicated to the work. But yeah, that will take us on a whole different, we could do that. We could talk about that stuff all day. But we also have a second layer of this work here. And Doris, you alluded to it about the myths and those other responsibilities that take place, not just with the individual, because individually people buy into those ideas of what they can and can't do. But sometimes that transfers to what campuses feel. And we have some folks that specialize in some of these newer policies around what folks can and can't potentially do and can actively do. And they come from the Fair Chance Ordinance, and they're really well versed in that and have helped students all the way in San Francisco, even though Roberta is rooted in San Bernardino, which is a different kind of space in California. But it's happening, and I think that's important work. Roberta and Brendan, would you kind of, who wants to go first and kind of sharing that work and how strongly that can affect our students and what they can and can't do on campuses?
So a couple of questions for you. Sounds like funding comes from the governor, which is amazing. Where on campus is Project Rebound housed? Are you in student affairs, enrollment, provost office?
Yeah, well, we've been on both sides. Like I told you initially, we were rooted under the Department of Sociology, but up until the 90s, the Associated Students took us in, which is student services side of the work. So we're housed physically in the what we call the student center at San Francisco State. You know, middle of campus, neutrally placed, where you know, people from all sides can access it.
All right, and next kind of question, when a student is trying to look into, or prospective student of, hey, can I go into this particular degree program? Would I be able to get licensed? Like, how do you help them determine whether or not that's possible? Do you have, and I guess it kind of almost logistically, like you talked about all the connections that you have across campus, which I know a lot of that gets formed over time and making them, but do you have anything more formal where you like say to all the advising centers, because like I don't know how yours operates, but we have a different advising center for every college at UNLV. So like, is it something where you're like, hey, give us one person from every advising center that's our contact for that center? Or like, is it more organic of like, hey, I happen to know this person, so that's who I'm gonna walk you over to go see?
No, Sonny, I'm glad you mentioned that right quick. I don't want to take away from our fair chance specialists, but one thing that you talk about transferable skills, for those of us who have lived behind those walls, there's one thing about your network, and in prison, those networks are based on survival. You know, you could be on one main line 1 week, and then somebody comes and picks you up on a bus, and you're way in another side of the state the next day. But when you get there on those main lines, it's your responsibility in the name of survival to know, you know, who to stay away from. Number one, who works in the kitchen, who has the canteen hookup, who has all of those things. These are the people you can get a haircut from without creating all kind of problems. All that's your survival network. When we have applied that same transferable process to campus. On campus, there's key players, and we don't just deal with anyone. We don't push anyone off. Go see general registrar's office. We have point persons in admissions, in you know, advising. Certainly, until we were able to hire the best advisor in the world in our program, we had to have that point person. But the recipe is on these different spaces to recognize these people, bring them into your network, and deal with them. Not, you know, and sometimes it takes coaching as people move on. But you have your network that deals with your people that are, you know, what we consider friendly to the population. And, you know, because some people just don't, you know, they feel a certain way about formerly incarcerated people. We don't want to involve them in our fold. We don't want to deal with that, because that stuff kind of sparks, you know, kind of an animosity or some negative kind of relationships, and we don't want to do that. But yeah, that's how the network piece works. But I think as far as, you know, the specific people, when they have the ability to advise and mentor a person about possible careers in the future, we're just now developing these allied kind of trainings for that stuff. But it's our relationships with folks like the Fair Chance Group, like Brendan and Roberta, the work that they're doing is helping us, because with them and their efforts, we can educate an entire state. So hopefully we can touch on some of that, and then we'll have time maybe for some more Q&A. I don't want to take from them.
I think that's all the questions for now, so keep going. Fabulous.
Okay. Who's next?
All right, well, I'll tee it off, and I'll let you follow up, Roberta. So good morning, everybody. My name is Brandon Butler. I'm the Assistant Deputy Director of Education and Outreach for the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing. I know that's a mouthful, right? It's like, can the title be any longer? But basically, you know, we're California's civil rights agency. And, you know, I've had the pleasure to connect with Jason and Roberta and you know, Project Rebound and other reentry community-based groups all throughout California to really engage in a joint collaboration to try to prevent discrimination by reaching out to employers, reaching out to folks who are getting out, to let them know about their civil rights in this area, right? And so what I want to do today is kind of give maybe a little overview of the Fair Chance Act in California, as well as a little kind of shout out to, you know, the resources you already have in Nevada. And then I'll talk about a couple of cases we've had that I think, you know, will inspire us to do some work. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. And I got a little PowerPoint, and then I'm gonna show a little video, and we'll kind of, you know, call myself the Zoom DJ now in the pandemic. So let me go ahead and start with this. But thank you again. Let's see here. All right. All right. All right. So let me just run through, we could spend a lot of time getting into the Fair Chance Act, what we've been doing as an agency, but at the end of the day, it's not, if we don't connect with the community, Project Rebound, the broad reentry community, it's really hard to enforce these laws. So it's really a collaborative effort. I think as you at UNLV are thinking about how you can assist students, in a similar Project Rebound program, know that you already have some laws in Nevada to help you, including a similar law that we have in California. So first, just give you a quick disclaimer that no legal advice here, but we are California's civil rights agency. So we're the office that deals with all the complaints for employment discrimination, housing discrimination, very broadly. But the Fair Chance Act is in our jurisdiction. And so, that's our mission, is we are, California Civil Rights Agency. So I'm going to move through so we can kind of get to the meat. But basically, I think as you probably brought up in your institute at the first training, and as well as today, why do we need a Fair Chance Act? Why are we here? And we're here because we've had, a mass incarceration situation in the United States where millions have been in prison, disproportionately impacting people of color, particularly Black people and Latinx community. And if we had a preference in employment throughout, in California or abroad to say, I'll never hire anyone with a felony, anyone who's ever been to prison, the impact of that disproportionately impacts the Black and brown communities of the United States. And, it's hard for folks to then get gainfully employed, get housing, et cetera. And it continues that cycle. So the Fair Chance Act is really a critical law here in California to try to help folks actually be able to re-enter the community and get gainfully employed. So the way it works in California is that our laws apply to all employers who have 5 or more employees. You have to follow our Fair Chance Act, which is basically, it prohibits an employer from asking about a criminal conviction history before offering you the job, right? So they can ask, but only after they have conditionally offered the job, right? Now, Nevada has a similar law, right? That came actually on the same day our Fair Chance Act started in 2018. But Nevada's is more narrow, right? It applies to all public employers, right? Now that's state, city, county. That's, that's a lot of folks at universities, et cetera. So you have a similar law in Nevada that's enforced by your Nevada Civil Rights Commission. It's a little different than ours, but I think the broad takeaways are going to be the same that I'll go through. So, know that, in Nevada, you have a law already to help folks, get employed, regardless of their criminal history. So very similar. Now, I'm going to just basically, I thought I would go through this, but I thought maybe it would be helpful to show a video that we did with our corrections department in California, because the Fair Chance Act has a few parts to it, and I think it's great to kind of hear how it works. And so maybe what I'll do is, to mix it up a little bit, I'll play a video that we did that's airing in all of the California state prisons right now. Folks who are inside are watching this video, and it's a video that we did to kind of quickly highlight what is the law and why is it helpful? Why is it something that folks need to know? And I'm happy to say it airs on the Inmate TV commercial program throughout all the California state prisons. So let me go ahead and show the video. And then from there, we can pick up a little bit of some of the things we've been doing, folks we've been helping. So let me go ahead and stop to share and then share my. All right, so here we go.
Are you worried about how you're going to get a job when you return home, or whether employers are even going to consider hiring you? This is what California's Fair Chance Act is all about. Let me tell you about it. When you go home and look for a job, you have the right to be judged on your work qualifications, not your past. My name is Brandon Butler, Assistant Deputy Director of Education and Outreach at the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing, California's civil rights agency. In California, we believe formerly incarcerated people deserve the right to participate in their community as a thriving member with access to employment, housing, and community resources. If you were locked up and did your time, you should not be locked out of society when you return home. That is why, under California law, it is unlawful for employers to ask or include a question about conviction history on a job application or ask about a past conviction prior to a conditional job offer. That means an employer can't ask you about your conviction history or run a background check until after they've already offered you the job. Remember the box on the job application that used to say, have you been convicted of a felony, yes or no? Well, that has been banned. We banned the box in California. An employer can ask you about your criminal history or run a background check after they offer you a job, but they still have to follow some rules. The employer is never allowed to ask about things you were not convicted for or convictions that have been expunged or sealed. If you've been pardoned or received a certificate of rehabilitation, the employer can't ask about that either. If the employer wants to take back the job offer after the background check, that can only happen after the employer conducts an individualized assessment. That means the employer has to consider you as an individual person. They have to consider the time that has passed and how the crime you were convicted of is related to the job you applied for. If the employer is still going to take back the job offer because of your history, they need to send you their decision in writing, listing out the convictions they think disqualify you and provide you the conviction history report they base their decision on. Then you get 5 days to challenge the decision. For example, there might be something in the criminal report that's just wrong, or you can provide information to change the employer's mind, such as information about your work history, special circumstances that help explain your past crime, or education or training you've received. In other words, evidence showing that you can do the job and that your conviction history isn't relevant. If the employer is still going to take back the job offer after considering all the evidence, it has to be because your conviction history has a direct relationship with the specific duties of the job. For example, if a person was convicted of a felony traffic offense while driving a car, their conviction history would have a direct relationship to a job as a limousine driver. If the employer takes back the job offer, they need to let you know in writing that you can file a complaint with our office, the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, if you believe your rights were violated. At the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, we are here to help, and it's free. Call us at 800-884-1684 or TTY at 800-700-2320 or California's Relay Service at 711. Remember, we have banned the box in California. In California, you have a right to a fair chance to get a job, and the Fair Chance Act protects you. Thank you.
All right, there you have it in terms of an overview of the fair chance law in California. You see there's several steps to it, several parts to it, but at its essence is really giving folks an opportunity to be gainfully employed and really show who they are. And so Nevada has a similar law. Hopefully one day it'll apply to private employers, not just public employers, as it, to my knowledge, does now. But this is relevant, this law and its impact. So let me just show a few other slides I want to show here. And then I'll pass it off to Roberta. So we kind of already went through the law, so I'm not going to go through it again. But do know, similar to Nevada, there are some folks who are exempt, right? Like law enforcement, generally exempt, things like this. So there are some little carve outs, but generally applies to all employers with 5 or more employees. And as the video pointed out, some information is just off limits, right? We can't look at arrests. They're subject to a couple of exceptions under our California Labor Code. If you're going to be like dispensing medication or working in a hospital situation, they could ask. But regardless, we can't ask about arrests. Things that have been sealed or juvenile records, participation in a diversion program that has been completed, right? So we have lots of ways where things that are off limits. This is what I call the off limits part of the law, what you heard in the video. So just moving through that. An interesting thing you may be asking yourself is, well, what happens if an employer asks an applicant for about their conviction history unlawfully, before offering, they're in the interview and the employer says, hey, you've been convicted of a felony conviction. That's unlawful under our law. What do you do? And what we've said in our guidance is that employers who violate our law by asking about conviction history prior to making a conditional offer, can't use an employee's failure to disclose that in the interview as the reason to later, fire them, right? So, so if someone doesn't disclose their conviction history when they were asked unlawfully, that can't be the reason to later say, you lied and told me the truth, I'm firing you. So we do have a way there. I won't go through the fair chance process, but just know, again, this is the opportunity where the employer has to conduct an assessment. It can't just say all convictions are a problem, but only those that are really directly related to the work. And in the video, we give the example of a limousine driver who is applying for a job as limousine driver rather, and had a conviction for a felony traffic offense. And those are the types of convictions that are directly related. But it's not like every conviction is directly related. Some shouldn't even be looked at. You may see it on the conditional job offer as an employer, or after you've done the background check, but it's not even, has no relevancy to the job. So you're not even going to go to this, these further steps, which is when the employer is seeking to preliminary take back the job offer and gives the applicant time to kind of challenge that with information. So, I won't take you through it, but you heard in the video the way that it works in the directly related convictions. But I want to take you over here, kind of quickly, and again, know that when one of these cases come through our office, the applicant is entitled to all forms of damages, right? They're, if they were emotional distress, if they got a different job that, didn't pay as much, there could be damage there, maybe getting the person hired, the applicant, actually the job. So there's a lot of different remedies we can use once we move forward with a case. But I think, a case we helped, someone actually who recently graduated from college was Anders T. And, basically, he sought out DFVH because Anders was, and this is in his words, he was incarcerated nearly a decade ago. It was a time in my life that I regret, and to any person that I caused pain to, I profusely apologize. 1 year ago, I graduated with my Bachelor of Science degree. I had completed my probation and was ready to put the past behind me. I had heard about a position that was hiring several people out of college to work at a multinational company via a contracting agency. I applied. The first 3 interviews flew by, and finally a job offer was extended to me. My recruiter had mentioned that there was a background check involved, and I had explained my situation. The crime occurred 8 or 9 years ago. I had graduated from college. I was out of trouble, and the job responsibilities had nothing to do with the crime. My background check came back with something on it, but my crime was not listed. I explained myself to my recruiter, and as soon as I could. And then there was no further contact from them. I reached out a week later, 2 weeks later, a month later, until I got the hint. Yet the firm kept posting the same position that I was denied. 2 months after I had applied for the position, I filed a complaint with DFVH. And then we asked, Anders talks about how did the experience affect him? And he goes, most people say after you've been released from incarceration that you have a new lease on life. What they forget to tell you is that it comes with several caveats. Companies still deny a person employment because of their past misdeeds, even when the job does not call for it. From this experience, I've found the necessary tools and people who are willing to help me file for expungement. As of October 2018, my crimes were expunged. This experience with being denied employment made me see the importance of having tangible paperwork. And he goes, what do you want people to know about discrimination based on criminal background? And he goes, California is one of the most progressive states in the union, but discrimination is rampant even in our modern world. One must constantly be on the watch for it. As far as discrimination, as far as crimes are concerned, people who have committed certain crimes should not do certain jobs, but people also need to show that they can change, that they can grow, regardless of their circumstances. To say otherwise is to deny the human experience. So there was Anders in his words after we assisted him with a case based on a discrimination in a criminal background. And, know that, we take these complaints. And then also last week, we launched a public portal where the public can, if they don't want to file a complaint, but they're seeing discriminatory statements in job ads or on applications, they can just screenshot it and we'll work that case up. Because we were hearing this from folks who were being released, that they were seeing so much discrimination they didn't have time to file all these complaints. And so we're trying to find ways to try to get out in front of it, try to prevent it. But still to this day, it remains a big issue for us to try to continue to stop this type of discrimination because we still see it quite frequently. So there's still a lot of work to do, and I think the work that you're doing, you're contemplating doing and developing in Nevada, I think is wonderful. I know Project Rebound has been a partner of ours, and together we're trying to educate folks to know their civil rights, because this is something that is part of the employment process, and we have to be ready for it. We have to know what our rights are, and we have to know who to reach out to when there's problems. And I can tell you from reaching out to reentry groups and the Inland Empire Reentry Coalition and others, complaints have come in. People are filing more complaints. We've seen a dramatic uptick in complaints filed with our office as we've started engaging the community. So it does translate. So we have a lot of work to do, but it's important work. And I encourage you, if we can ever be a resource in materials we've put out or videos we've done and things you're thinking of doing in Nevada, feel free to reach out. And as always, thank you, Jason, for the opportunity to connect with Project Rebound.
Thank you, Brendan. That work is incredibly important. And like I mentioned, has helped quite a few of our students way in San Francisco that were stressed out because of something that someone had told them on a job. But I know Doris and Rafa, you just got through trying to impress upon us the importance of true advocacy. And sometimes that true advocacy is having a friend in a high place that knows the evolution of some work on a different level. And what we want to prevent in this work is some of that stuff we talked about briefly yesterday, in like even a educator saying some pretty hurtful stuff based on their opinion of the population. And that's where that separation between personal opinion and truth in possibilities, I guess, happens, because they made a judgment, personal judgment, that it was morally and ethically, they were morally and ethically opposed to teaching psychology to incarcerated people because they could never get a job anyway. It was a waste of time and they don't deserve it, basically. That was their opinion. So on these campuses, UNLV, any other campus, if we can educate people on these possibilities, like and Roberta's been in the trenches dealing with students in social work, which was a field that they tried to prevent people from pursuing. You can never, get an internship. You can never work in this field. You can never get a license. Roberta, please educate them on the things that you've been doing, because people just don't know. I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now? So sorry about that. I don't know. I've been having problems with my mic forever. But hello and good morning. Thank you for having me today. My name is Roberta Fox. I am currently a graduate student. I am also a participant in Project Rebound. So I'm also a formerly incarcerated person. I am a student worker at Project Rebound, and I interned with them in my bachelor's in 2019. So I interned, that's how I came upon Project Rebound. And the conditions for me interning there are quite interesting and I think relevant to what we're discussing today. So as a social work student, I do need to do internships as part of my requirements for my program. And I was originally accepted to go to our our county's child welfare agency, but I was ultimately denied at the last minute. So that created a little bit of an issue for me. And fortunately, I was directed to go to our campus's Project Rebound, where I obtained an internship and got to do some very exciting things, which I want to tell you about. So first, I do want to say that as a formerly incarcerated student, it was very hard for me to hear that I was denied this internship. It could have, I think, debilitated me and really severely affected my motivation to move forward. So I do understand what the students who I work with are going through, but I also understand the steps to get through that. And it really did provide me with a lot of fire to work with this population. So one of my I say responsibilities or tasks, something that I got involved with our campus Project Rebound, which is in San Bernardino, it's in Southern California, is the involvement with a community collaboration called the Inland Empire Fair Chance Coalition. So who we are is a group of reentry service providers in our community, and of course, directly impacted people as well. We also have partnerships with our State Department, who you met, Brandon Butler, and other statewide agencies who assist formerly incarcerated students or individuals with career development, with civil rights, housing, many different fronts. So as a member of this coalition, I began to learn about our Fair Chance Act. We took different steps to help others learn about that. So one of the huge things that we do, we've done in our community and also with Jason and other campuses, is to help inform people about their rights. So we inform directly impacted people about their rights, like how Brandon just did, but we also discuss this with employers, because a lot of times employers don't know the law. The law was implemented in 2018, and we've seen employers who have absolutely no idea what their responsibilities are under this law. So we do provide trainings specifically for employers. We do provide trainings for service providers, and we do provide trainings for directly impacted people. Another thing that I've done was work to file complaints with some of our Project Rebound students who have been denied because of their criminal background or who have been asked questions that were unlawful. And an interesting thing we do in our community is we do job testing. So Brandon said he sees a lot more complaints being filed, and I think a lot of that is because of the coalition. We go out and we read applications and we look for those blanket ban statements that are unlawful, and we report those to our state agency. We discuss experiences with directly impacted people to find out, were you asked about this conviction prior to a job offer? In any way were you violated? We ask our people who we work with, who directly impacted people, to please record these violations so that we can offer proof to the State Department and we won't go into hearing. Currently, we're involved in a class action lawsuit with a very large corporation because they continually violate the law. So hopefully we can see some movement there. So that's part of what we do as this coalition. I mean, the law is passed, but there's still a lot of work to be done, as Brandon said. And that's something that we do here. And that's something that I wanted to give you a little bit of information about, because in your community, it's a possibility as well. And I think this is how you really get movement. You start to see changes at the community level and at the state level when you band together and you start to understand what's going on in your community and how to better help those chances for people to get employed when they get out. So you can check us out at iefcc.com, and that could give you a little bit of maybe an outline or a template if you wanted to look into that. So other than that, so another thing that I've done that I was really interested in doing as a student, as someone who's been through this process myself, is to help students prepare, help individuals prepare, community members, be prepared for applying with jobs with criminal records, because it is a process. And Brandon didn't really go into it, but a strong hinge point of this law is that each employer must complete an individualized assessment. So that means that each applicant has the opportunity to provide proof of rehabilitation. And but in our state, they have 5 days. They have 5 days to provide this proof. So we wanted to sit down with everyone we could, anyone who would listen, and let them know what they could do to prepare for this, for this thing that's going to happen. So just to touch on a couple of those things, and you can find some of this information at the website I mentioned too. I think we have some videos of the training there, but some things that you really want to encourage students to have are those personal statements, a way that they can tell their story, a way that they can tell it clearly, succinctly, and to end it with, on a positive note, and to really just, like you would in a cover letter, just restate their interest in the job and how their skills and qualities make them best suited for it. The personal statement is important, and we do see that a lot of people have trouble talking about what happened. They don't know. I've been asked the question, and it's thrown me a couple times, and I'm like, what do you want to know? You really want to sit down and kind of go over that and help them to understand how to really best present that when the time comes. Another thing is letters of reference, and that's something you can do as faculty, as advisors. You can really provide those letters for students to help further their cause and further their career. Oftentimes they will ask for arrest records and things like that, but honestly, that's something that I don't agree with. But we do tell each of our students to have a copy of your background and to know what's on there before you apply. A lot of times there are mistakes, and those mistakes can be dealt with through the proper channels. And let's see, we kind of tell them like how to present the material, especially during COVID. It's been difficult. You can't just provide things in person. You have to email them, download PDFs, combine. Those are things that our population might not really be comfortable with. So we did provide a little bit of training on that. And as I said, a lot of this information is available on our website, and I'll put it in the chat in just a few minutes. So directly related to our campus and to our students in career preparation, because, you know, it's interesting to me, and I'm in my master's program, so I'm doing my research right now on this. And it's interesting to me that a lot of the funding that's being thrown at reentry and at education due to you know, as an alternative to the criminal justice system, it focuses on recidivism. It focuses on the fact that we don't want people to recidivate. This shows that, you know, recidivism is reduced. But what happens afterward? Like, what do we do after recidivism? Can we go beyond that? Can we look at career development? Can we look at what the job market looks like for our graduates, for our college graduates? We know that there are these barriers to employment for everyone. We also know that there are barriers to college graduates as well. We know that race, ethnicity, and intersectional identities have a lot to do with discrimination in the job market. And that's what our student population represents. So that's a lot of my research there. I'm pretty excited about that. And I'm gonna go on and do a little bit about that. But a big part of that is the licensing. And that's a lot of what we've been talking about here and what we see on our campus. On our campus in particular, we have a lot of majors who are going into the social sciences, and they will need to be licensed, or they want to be licensed with the Board of Behavioral and Social Sciences. If I would have listened to everyone who told me not to go into social work, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here. And I just kept going because I'm stubborn, and that's just who I am. But sometimes, you know, I've met with students who have been just terrified, because it is a big decision, is a big commitment to make. And I can understand why faculty might feel the same way. They don't want to advise their students to go into something that they don't believe that they're going to be successful in. In our state, in California, we've seen a lot of change in licensing laws. We just had one passed in 2020. It's AB 2138, the professional licensing with convictions. And this law requires that the licensing boards, and I think there are over 30 different professional licensing boards included in this, ascribe the same requirements as Ban the Box in the terms of individual assessment. So what they need to do is they need to gather those informations of rehabilitation, which I mentioned earlier, which can be used in multiple different ways. And this is another one, and provide those informations, those documents and that proof to the board so that they can be individually assessed. And I do want to tell you that at our campus alone, we've had 3 formerly incarcerated Masters of Social Work students become licensed with their LCSW in the last 2 years. So that's really exciting. And you ask about what is it that we can do for our students to really help them to follow their dreams and their goals, and and I think, and Jason mentioned that earlier, I think is seeing that on the campus, right? Seeing these people who are successful, and seeing that success is also an option for them. So that's a big part of that. But I don't know what the laws are like in regards to licensing and things like that. So I would also advise that you research that and research it and ask your students to do the same. I don't know how much your advising staff will have information about that on. I'm not sure. But definitely the information is there. You can go to the Nevada Equal Rights Commission. You can learn a little bit about that there. You can learn about things through your legislature department and see what's going on. Definitely come together with community agencies. And I mean, the coalition in our community has done great work. So I would say that that's a really important thing. It's a really great resource for us here in San Bernardino and Inland Empire. And honestly, the last thing, I'm just never give up. These students have these are their dreams, you know, these are their dreams. This is what they want to do. And no matter what, that should never be extinguished. And on our campus, we also have a student who just graduated with his BS in nursing. And one of the key parts to that, I think, was he was able to secure an internship with the Veterans Department. So that might be a resource that you can also look out to for medical interest. And one more, we wrote a letter of recommendation for one of our students who's going in for his Juris Doctorate. So for the California Bar Association. So it's possible. It is possible. And that's just what I want to leave you with today. And I thank you so much for letting me speak to you. And thank you for taking the time to really look into this issue. Thank you.
Roberta, that stuff is extremely important. And you are right. I like what you said. We do not want to be in the business of being dream extinguishers. I think I might have to steal that one from you, because that's important. And some of the things that we hear in higher education do, I think, just that. Yesterday, we talked about the importance of understanding the impact of disclosure and how that can affect us in different times. I don't think there's any master that knows exactly when for each individual case and each person, each situation. But I think that's something that we will deal with for the rest of our lives. I don't care how long I've been out of prison. There are some spaces where there might be some real visceral kind of hatred in the room about those people that have, especially if in a case like mine, if it's a violent crime, they don't like that. Some people just feel like there's no redemption from any kind of violence. It doesn't matter that I was 20 years old at the time. They don't care. It's just like, that's you're that type of person, and we don't, particularly care for you. And I've heard it, and whatever. It's a part of the life, but it also directly relates to something else that you talked about, and is connected to not only applying for possible career stuff. You talked about the impact of a personal statement. And a personal statement is something that is important to this stuff all the way across the board, because it can also help you in the sense of for scholarships, financial aid stuff that's connected to your success in education, but also after education, after like employment and career. And a lot of you're right, and it is connected to disclosure. Some people don't know how to frame their life, how to put that articulate it. You talk about the importance of how eloquently you articulate that experience, your experience, and for whatever you're interested in. And I think there's a heightened level of coaching about how to do that appropriately with this group. And I think that it's going to do us a super service to learn how to do it appropriately. I was fortunate enough to have some wordsmiths like Doris and Dr. Smith help me put together those things. Rafa has gotten really good at resume writing and personal statements, cover letters and stuff like that. But we need to even, almost have a specialized team for that across the state, and maybe possibly for some Nevada folks. I think that that's a huge piece of this work, and I think that some interest in that direction is important. I learned something today. I learned that I was fortunate enough to get a certificate of rehabilitation, and I think that you've explained that it is helpful. It is, can impact careers and different objectives for what people can and can't ask you in that space. But it was extremely difficult to get that. And I was fortunate, you talk about networks. I was fortunate enough to know a lot of folks that were able to help me put together a nice package. And also my years of experience in doing much better with my life endeavors, I think helped out. But it's all connected to network and being able to articulate it and package it.
I have a quick question for you in regards to coaching in the job search. Do you advise that people wait until the background check is done and the question comes up about a previous conviction, or that they already in their cover letter, for example, say, this is who I am. This is what you'll find, and here's my story. Essentially, put your personal statement out there before it's asked for, or wait until it's asked for.
So I'll take that one. Is that all right? Yeah, so we wouldn't advise that you put it out there before it's asked for, basically. And I think Brandon mentioned it earlier too. If they are asked about it prior to the time that it is right for it, then it is okay to politely decline. You could even say something like, I know this is against the law. Like, I don't want you to get in trouble. We've had our people say that before, like as a potential response. But no, we don't advise that you put that information out before it's time to put it out.
Yeah, and I would second that, Roberta. And I'd say a couple more things. One is, the conviction has to be directly related to the job. So sometimes, even though there will be a conviction that may come up on the background check, it may not be relevant to the job. So employers they should keep moving, it shouldn't even be subject to a concern. And so there's that aspect. The other aspect, at least in California, is and it depends on what kind of background check you're running, but in terms of like consumer background checks, like credit reports, they will still show whether you're the date of conviction, the date of release, the date of parole. But 7 years after that date, they do fall off the credit record. So that may not even be seen by the employer, depending on how long ago it is. And then one thing I didn't mention, but in California, we unfortunately don't have a hard look back period. It says you can't look past this date, but we do have what's called in the law a rebuttable presumption, meaning that convictions after 7 years are deemed not relevant to your ability to be relevant to the job. So it's going to be very hard for an employer to pull out an old conviction and say, this is the concern. So we have a few little safeguards, but I think all that goes to the reason of go ahead and apply, put your best foot forward. If something does come up, as Roberta said, have that package ready though, because you don't have a lot of time generally, 5 days, and that could differ. But yeah, I think that's a great idea to start working with your counselors, your resource folks, that statement, those letters of recommendation. We didn't get into like all of the forms of mitigating evidence. There's a lot, but you could kind of think about it. All forms of rehabilitation, anything that goes to that issue of look what I've done, look at the jobs I've held, look at the steady housing, look at all these things. We want to get that ready. And so I think that's where everyone comes in here as kind of a community to know that it may come up, but have it ready. And, that's going to be helpful.
Now, Sonny, I know that we have provided a great deal of information on different topics, but I want to make sure, looks like we have a nice little amount of time to get into some dialogue about things we may have missed that folks are interested in in the Nevada area that we haven't thought about. So I would love to figure out a way how we can get into that.
Yeah, that would be great. So I've been asking questions that I know that we've been talking about in our task force. But if there's others out there, like this would be a great time to get those questions out there. There seems to be some really great concrete advice. So I know that even, for example, that question I just asked, like I've been in dialogues with students where they're like, hey, I don't know what to do because I know I'm going to apply for this job and they will do a background check. So it's like, do I look better by having disclosed it up front or not? So like that was definitely super useful advice because I truthfully didn't know like what the advice would be. I was like, so I think that type of information has been super useful. But yeah, are there other questions out there? Anyone else? Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask or put things in the chat. Looks like we have one question in the chat here. Does the Ban the Box in California extend to internships and volunteer opportunities?
It's a good question. I mean, I would, it's interesting. I'd have to take a quick look at our regulation on that. I mean, I'll say for purposes of like our harassment laws, yes, interns and volunteers apply. I would say it's very similar and probably would most likely be applicable because it should be in that vein. So I would go ahead and say yes, although I can't give a precise quote, but it should be. And either way, one thing I didn't mention is even outside of our fair chance laws, under Title VII, under all the laws of the United States, you know, if folks have a policy that, you know, bans anyone with a felony whatsoever, it still raises this issue in the law of having a discriminatory effect or a disparate impact on a distinct group. So, you know, that's why even in law enforcement programs, if someone has a conviction, there's a process to look at it. What was it? Because the law has kind of said, if we just ban everyone, it may have these racial disparities either way. So while not every state has a Fair Chance Act, the broad civil rights laws still apply. So I'd say that. So being that said, yes, I would say it's applicable.
All right, another question that's in the chat relates to making contacts in state and local government. And I will even say that I was thinking similar things, like sounds like California has a lot more legislation than Nevada does. But what is some of that recommendations around having those connections with state and local government? And even, for example, like obviously Project Rebound, you all managed to find an amazing partner with Brandon Butler. So like, how did that come about?
I mean, that's definitely all the networking. On the San Bernardino campus specifically, there are a tremendous amount of social worker specific formerly incarcerated majors. And they were running into roadblocks. I think they started to do some investigation. I don't know who did it, who connected with you first, Brandon. Was it Paul? Was it Roberta on that campus? But they introduced me to you, and we just kind of been networking together ever since. So I don't know, I can't even remember how it was formed, but I know it started.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I mean, again, I think the community's been so active that it wasn't really hard to start collaborating, just kind of reaching out. But yeah, but I think, you know, y'all reached out to us. There was Professor Jen Tilton, who was a part of the coalition. Like a lot of folks kind of came together. So, I mean, I think it was kind of natural. We were also looking for a partner. We were looking to do more in this area. So, you know, when I started my role a few years ago, this was a critical component for us, because during the first year of the Fair Chance Act, we hardly had any complaints. We thought there'd be, you know, thousands or at least, you know, hundreds, and it didn't happen. So we knew there needed to be a lot more outreach. So we did make that partnership, and it was definitely mutual, because we're trying to connect, you know, help educate. But I would say some of the natural folks are right, like your Nevada Civil Rights Commission. They're a natural partner because they at least enforce the public employer law, and you know, and a lot of jobs are with the government. And I bet if we were to look at applications and things, there may not be full compliance. And so having a partner there is helpful. And maybe there's other laws too. So I think that's like worth a, you know, a direct reach out. And they're not too big, the Nevada Human Rights Community. I mean, they're very personable, and I'm sure you could, you know, set meetings and dialogue. But I think that's a great partner, you know, among others.
Sounds good. All right, we're starting to get a number of questions, so I'm going to move down the list. One is, do you have any knowledge of how many of your colleges where you have F1 students are completing an honors course of study?
An honors course meaning like high school? What do you mean?
So UNLV has an honors college, so which does require a higher GPA generally if you're looking at those with a high school transcript. But actually, I don't know as much about honors college. David, do you want to answer that question, Sinclair?
Sure. So I'm the assistant director for admissions and recruitment at the Honors College here at UNLV. And we also take transfer students depending upon the GPA that they take in as well. We have different programs. Some are 4-year for students that are coming from high school. And then we also have 2-year programs for students that come in that are transfer students that want to conduct research as undergraduates, and then also another one for service learning, which is for students that come in that maybe have 30 credits or more, or they're high school students, excuse me, with an associate's degree coming from a dual enrollment program. And so a lot of different colleges and universities will have an honors college or course of study or just a specialized program as well. And I'm wondering if that's something that you track as well.
That'll be a Doris question, Doris, because he's talking that talk, Doris. He's losing
I'm
me.
sorry, that's my life, man. I got to talk that talk. That's my life, right?
Yep, I recognize the talk. Yes, so we don't have an honors college, but there's certainly, programs that, for example, Dr. Smith's program, the psychology department has an honors program. We don't track it. What we are working on right now is tracking the fellowship programs and scholarship programs that our students are applying to and are admitted to. So we have some really prestigious scholarships. That information, though, I don't know how it is regulated on UNLV's campus. That is information we cannot get from our academic research institute on campus. We have to work with financial aid. Then there's FERPA protection. So right now we're working with FERPA so we can track that information and make it part of the brochure that I shared with you all earlier that shows the demographics, but also the accomplishments of our students. I'm not sure, Amy, if you wanted to add something to that about honors in the science and engineering.
I'm only that I shouldn't be stunned, but like year after year after year, I can't think of another group on campus that has more representatives who are at the top of the class, receiving the hood, taking part in the honors program in our college or in our department. I mean, it's just, it's pretty astounding. And the fellowships and awards that Doris was referencing as well, you hear, yeah, there's always a rebound or two students who get all these prestigious awards. It's impressive.
Yeah, we definitely have one program that seems like it would be a really great fit for formerly incarcerated students here for honors college. And everything at UNLV is an open secret. I'll leave it at that when it comes to data. So I don't think we would have any issue sharing that information or sharing all of our connections at UNLV with those students. And thank you for your answers. And this is a great conference. I'm loving it. Thank you.
All right, we've got several more questions. One is related to guidance on helping students prepare like a written or verbal, their personal statements about their criminal conviction. So, and is there information that should or should not be included in those personal statements?
Well, I'll start that because why I feel that is extremely important. I learned the importance of it applying for graduate school as well as different scholarships. But I think that where you're going to use that statement has a lot to do with how much you put on it. And in grad school, in counseling, it wasn't, probably the best thing for a person to outright disclose everything. But certain levels of your history could be beneficial, and it ended up being beneficial to me. But I know some people we had to really reel in because they're willing to put it all out front, just right there, first, and they're applying for a scholarship. And it could be one of the prestigious scholarships that had nothing to do with that kind of information. So sometimes we've learned to recognize, but it's always good, like I mentioned, to have some great wordsmiths around to advise you on how to eloquently, tie everything in that fits specifically what you're using it for. I think so. That's an important piece. But finding out who people that know what goes where and when it should be there, I think is important. That's just my 2 cents. But somebody else can maybe tap in on their history of doing that work too.
Yeah, I'll just touch on a little bit. So I just looked on the website and I provided in the chat, and there is actually a recording of the training we provided, and it does have a template for this and as Jason said, it's going to look a lot different when you're doing it for graduate school or scholarships. Sometimes you can use these experiences as strengths. That's how they should be seen, right? Because it is resilience. But when you're applying for a job, it might look a little different. So we do have a template there, but I would just kind of go over, if I can remember, you would want to briefly discuss the charge, talk about No, don't talk about it too much. That's a lot question we get a lot of times is people don't, they might want to say too much. In the process of that, it may come off as not accepting accountability. So what we see is that employers really want to see that accountability part of it in the letter. But I think what's more important is to highlight the growth and to show where you've come since then. So that should be really the bulk of the letter. And mitigating circumstances as well can be included in that, like first paragraph and then introduction. So I hope that helped, but please check it out at the website. And if you have any other questions, just shoot.
Great. Just so everyone knows, as there's been several links to several websites, I have been copying them out of the chat and putting them into another document. And of course, we have all this recorded, but all that's been useful. I've been trying to take notes as people are talking. A question is around if an F1 student does not wish to disclose their conviction until asked, how do they account for that time on their resume? So if there's a gap in their resume, how do they account for that?
You know, I don't know, Roberta, if you have thoughts. I mean, in terms of like the employer side, I mean, I get it, you know, and that does come up, right? Like if you're looking at gaps, how do you explain it? I mean, I think it's case by case, but you know, it's hard for me to give specific guidance as like a state agent. What do you say? But I mean, do know that they should not be asking about your convictions. You're trying to elicit a response. So there may be some kind of creative phraseology that perhaps Roberta or Jason would have. But you know, every case, yeah. You know, maybe there's something, but yeah, I get it. You know, I mean, that's hard. And I would agree with Roberta that sometimes, you know, there's mitigating evidence that's related to, you know, work that happened when someone was probably incarcerated. So sometimes it comes out as mitigating evidence, and you know, maybe there's something you want to share with that, but that's not, there's nothing ever easy about that, right? So yeah, I don't have a phrase, but I know that's a challenge, and I hear you there.
Hey, Rafa, we've had to get pretty creative in that office with some of that history, and that's a given. And
Yeah.
You know, people have had jobs in custody and things like that. So how you word them, how you package it, and put it in there it takes time sometime and a little finessing, but it's worked for folks. We've gotten a lot of people their first gigs right out of college based on some of those resumes that Rafa played a huge part in helping them design and structure.
Right.
And really pay attention to transferable skills.
That's right.
So our students have developed, like, again, here's the strengths-based versus the deficit-based approach, to really help them think about their transferable skills. And that's something that we can guide students in, because sometimes, you know, what comes natural, they don't always identify strengths. And to just like, what did you do? And what did it take for you to do? So this word like unskilled labor is really, you know, an oxymoron, and there is no unskilled labor. Everything they did required a certain skill. And then we help students to identify that, and they can put that on the resume. And one of our students worked with Roberta, and he was very anxious. He was just released. He was still staying in a transitional house. He attended one workshop. He worked with Roberta one-on-one on his resume, applied to a biotech company, and was offered the job within 2 weeks.
All right, so next question relates to, but not all felons are formally incarcerated. So those with a criminal conviction sometimes face the collateral consequences of those convictions. So how do you work with those populations?
You definitely have. So you mean like someone that may have been convicted of something, but was able to procure a kind of an agreement. Maybe it was all probation, all fines, all something like that, or some of the court, what they call alternative sentencing model kind of thing.
And I think some of the marijuana convictions don't always include actual jail time, but is a felony conviction.
Oh yeah. I mean, we don't care about, you know, of that part. If they have a felony, especially if they're on paper, any of that justifies our support for the student if they're dealing with those obstacles, because there is a framework that like Michelle Alexander put it best, that they fall into a category. Sometimes we can get into the details of how long a person was sentenced to and all of the details in that. But what happens is this after the effects of the residual effects of that experience and the caste system, or what she termed as the new Jim Crow, that affects a person with different resistance and employment and other opportunities, that we want to help them navigate. And sometimes that just people feeling a certain way about once they find out that you have that felony or whatever it is, they don't care. They don't get into the details about how long you spent behind the wall or what else. It's just the fact that you have that. So yeah,
and for our work, sorry, Jason, didn't mean to interrupt you, but we really, we started move away from using justice involved, and we're using system involved. And what I've learned as a counselor is formerly incarcerated students are not a monolithic group. And even folks that have been incarcerated don't always share the same experience. So it's different for every student. So although there may be system involved, they're still individuals. And so we try to replace, judgment with curiosity, find out more about the context. Again, this is where trust and rapport really comes in. So we understand the context of a student. But in order to qualify for our services, a student has to be system involved, but not necessarily formally incarcerated. Students can be off parole, on parole. The felony conviction can be 20 years in the past or current. We work with everyone.
All right, and then I know there's some myths about financial aid and whether or not those with convictions are eligible for financial aid. Can you talk through some of those?
Yes, the greatest myth is that you don't qualify. And so, what the application really says, FAFSA application, free application for federal student aid, by the way, is really that, there are very few, there's actually a nice fact sheet, myths about financial aid, but there's a very, very small group that doesn't qualify for financial aid. So one example would be students who've been convicted of a drug-related conviction while they received federal student aid. In the 14 years that I've done this work, I've actually never met a student who didn't qualify for financial aid. So the best way to find out, again, the first F stands for free. It doesn't cost the student anything to find out whether they're qualified or not. And so that's something that I work with my students. It's like, apply. Even if you have a job and you make money, apply. You cannot find out whether you qualify if you self-select and don't apply.
And Doris, you had mentioned that you've been able to help some students find grants if they run out of aid. Do you have any advice for us on where we might find those grants?
Actually, that Jason secured those grants. That is his networking. So we have some money now from our state budget. We have some angel funders that have given money for our students, but I'd let Jason talk about that more.
Yeah, well, no, I didn't do that all by myself. That was our efforts that allowed us to have friends that were interested in supporting. But I mean, we have a bottom line budget through the Associated Students that supports us, our staff and allows us office space. And then with the new additional governor state funding that's filtered through the CSU, that's a whole additional source of income. And then we have, like Doris mentioned, some philanthropic folks that were interested in supporting students, and we were able to do those for emergency stuff that the school does not like to touch. That allows us we've been able to support people, especially through this time like COVID, for emergency housing issues that have popped up. We've helped people pay their rent. A lot of our students were gig workers, in addition to being students, working as bartenders, security guard, all that stopped. And they were having a difficult time paying rent. And we had to really come and make sure that we didn't lose them. And we did that because of that additional help. But you asked also about scholarships. Fortunately, as being at the the original campus, we're connected still to John Irwin's family, and they allowed San Francisco State to have an endowment scholarship specifically for our students. So we have every year we're having at least 3 students that are receiving over $3,000 for their academic achievements through the John Keith Irwin Scholarship that the university has taken on. It's an endowment that continues every year, and then Associated Students took on $1,000 one. It's in his name as well, but it's based mainly on recidivism. You know, people can prove that they're, you know, keeping good academic standards and they've discharged parole, probation. That's a whole other one. And then, you know, just other groups there's other scholarships that Rafa is helping them identify. One of our other staff members has identified a group that wanted to support the women with incarceration history specifically. A lot of our students have received those. So different, we always keep our eyes on those possibilities. And another thing, Sonny, that I would advise you, as a new kind of group doing this kind of work, is to connect with your development team on campus, create a relationship with them. They've really helped us. There was a dynamic lady named Cynthia King. She since left, but she helped us get that initial expansion grant that helped us support and branch out to 8 other additional campuses for 3 years. So there's all kind of collaborations and efforts that need to take place for that. But one question that I had about Nevada specifically is I think that a little of this work has to do with doing some homework on your own. And I realized, like, for Nevada, I don't know. I can speak to California all day. We know the institutions, the so-called correctional institutions that are doing work around college, that are doing correspondence courses. The Palo Verde, the Feather River, we know them like the back of our hand. And then the best one, the original face-to-face one, was Mount Tam in San Quentin that did that kind of face-to-face education. Their students are probably the best prepared to walk right out of that gate and sit in any college classroom. I don't care if it's Princeton. They're ready to go. They've been involved in a classroom setting before, so they were not doing it just through the mail. It's a little bit different kind of a setup. But I don't know what's going on in Nevada. Are you aware of, the campus, the prisons that have higher education kind of programs that might, people are procuring those kind of transcript efforts that might transfer to UNLV that, you can start outreaching with? And what are the reentry efforts that are going on in Nevada specifically? Are there big cities that have kind of reentry hubs or reintegration hubs that do that kind of stuff? A lot of parolees are coming there, probationers are coming there. Do we know that now or no?
I'm going to guess that Carolyn and Jeff with educational outreach are going to have the best information on that and the most context so far. We do have some faculty that have been involved in prison outreach programs, but right now, most of that formally happens through the community college, not through UNLV. But we have a number of faculty that are interested in trying to make it a UNLV initiative as well. So that's part of the plan in this. But Jeff Dietrich, or does anybody else want to jump in on that?
Yeah, so before pre-pandemic, I was spending time out at High Desert and State Prison, and Southern Desert. Those are our 2 state prisons out here in Indian Springs. The only thing that was out there, and the warden at the time at High Desert, Warden Williams, was trying to set up something. I don't know how far he's gotten because I haven't had contact with him in a while. But the only thing that was out there was across the way is Southern Desert, and they had Clark County School District had an adult education program in there to help them with their high set. So I was going out there to sit with the individuals that were getting released soon to talk about what I could do to help them out with once they get released, about vocational or any college programs and stuff like that. The only other thing here is we got Clark County Detention Center. Pre-pandemic, they have a program out there that they're starting back in June, but it's pretty much where they make all the individuals that are incarcerated come to all these community service locations within there, and they have this big event so they can sit down and get community services before they get released. And I was out there, of course, doing the higher education stuff. As far as I know, I haven't heard anything. I've heard maybe a rumor of CSN trying to get something out there like Sonny was talking about, but outside of that, nothing else that I know of, sir.
So, and Carolyn put in the chat, hope for prisoners, which I will say, Rashawn Williams, you were super helpful in connecting our efforts with, that's a local nonprofit that does a lot of the work and has so far actually been probably one of our best resources and connectors. But we've actually, I would say, found them useful in terms of us referring our students. That Hope for Prisoners has a lot of services, career development, finding housing and otherwise. But Rashawn or Carolyn, did anybody else want to talk about that? All right, and then there is another.
Rashawn's having some technical difficulties. He's going to pop in here real second.
Well, I was just going to back up, Jeff, that in Nevada, we are encouraged that the conversation's going on, and we do have a few connections out there, but it is at the very beginning level.
Yes, I would say the same thing, Carolyn. It is at the beginning level. Now, going back to the colleges, I do believe that CSN was in the makings of actually establishing some type of prison to college pipeline. I believe Hope for Prisoners had a hand in that, but I'm not sure as far as how, I'm not sure how far it's gone. I know Hope for Prisoners is actually a pretty good organization to partner with to assist with some of these inequities and issues that are prevalent in our justice impacted population.
Yeah, and I know that Laurel put in the chat around like CSN, our community college, is further along in the prison to pipeline program, as well as WSC in Northern Nevada. So those are the two community colleges that have prison to pipeline programs. But as Laurel put in the chat, like one of our thoughts was increasing our transfer agreements with CSN, particular to students coming from the formerly incarcerated programs in order to come into UNLV. But right now, I will say all of the work that we're doing has been with our currently admitted students. So those that have already found their way into higher education, but then get to UNLV and say, hey, like, it was super intimidating to get here, and then I'm here, and I have lots of questions, and there's no place on campus for me to go, which you'll hear more, I think, from the students next week. But so it was that where we were like, okay, you're right. And so it was that thought of that not only is there not as much of an intention on how do we bring people into the campus, but even once they're here, there's not a support system that's available. And so those are, I would say, initial efforts has been slightly focused on what support systems can we put in place once they're here. And I think some of that thought process was like, hey, we probably shouldn't be doing significant amounts of outreach if they're not going to have a great experience once they get here. So, but I do think that future steps would be related to that. And like the reason I deferred off to Carolyn and Jeff is because right now, most of that is happening through our Center for Academic Enrichment Outreach, which is our TRIO funded federal programs where they have a lot of outreach into Clark County School District and adult education reentry programs.
A lot of our referrals are word of mouth. So currently I had somebody write for me from High Desert 2 weeks ago. I just was able to write them back asking about correspondence courses, which my research indicates here in the state of Nevada, there is no type of correspondence courses. And I just doing a quick research nationally, that's a challenge too as well. And then I have currently helping another individual. We actually got him into some classes at CSN for the summer that just recently got released as well. And it's been a challenge for him because I've had to meet him at the library and stuff because he just doesn't have technology resources. So I meet him at the library, helped him do his FAFSA, helped him do his application to CSN. So a lot of the stuff, because of COVID, a lot of it has been word of mouth over the last year and a half. But that's usually how it is for us with our program. It's just a lot of word of mouth and friends hearing of friends, and they'll contact us and we can go from there. But luckily we're starting to get back out in the community and starting to do some more outreach as everything opens. So I'm hoping we'll get some increases there as well. We had one of our other counselors was going to Casa Grande, which is our halfway house here in town. And of course that stopped pre-COVID, you know, so hopefully he's able to get back in there as well. So we got our hands in a couple of different areas. It's just, again, COVID has been a challenge, but a lot of it has just been a lot of word of mouth too. So, and resources are kind of lacking, you know, with that as well. So
one thing that has come to my attention as we started to do some research into this is that Nevada actually contracts out some of our prisons. So a number of those that are convicted in Nevada are actually housed in Utah, which was a whole big thing during COVID and what was going on in Utah versus Nevada with COVID. But so we actually don't have as large of a prison system as one might think. It's also not a very populated state, with majority of the population being in Clark County, which is where UNLV is. So I have found there's always many unique things about being in Nevada, given that so much of the land mass in Nevada is not populated.
Can I ask UNLV, do you have a in-state tuition versus out-state tuition? Because the CSU, the mission is to, you know, first and foremost serve Californians. So sometimes we had students who were incarcerated in private prisons, so they were shipped to Arizona, had college transcripts from a different state, which then raises some flags with admissions. Is this really a California resident? And so we had to do some advocacy around that residency. And I don't know what happens at UNLV if a student comes and has California transcripts or Utah transcripts.
Yeah, we do have an in-state tuition, and 80% of our students are from Clark County. So a majority of them are commuter. We have a high non-traditional student population. And I mean, really, there's only 2 4-year institutions in Nevada. So if they're looking at a 4-year institution, they're either going to UNR, which they don't call themselves that, they're University of Nevada, or they're going to University of Nevada, Las Vegas. So those are really those only 2 options. And because majority of the population in Nevada is in Clark County, a majority of our students come from Clark County. So yes, if they had transcripts from Utah or California, there would be the out-of-state tuition. We do have the WUI, and because there aren't that many options in Nevada, I think we accept more WUI tuition than a lot of other state universities do. So we have a huge population of students from California at UNLV because our tuition is super affordable. So many of our students actually say that UNLV was more affordable than staying in state in California. So I will say tuition is not a barrier often, particularly if they're able to get financial aid, which we have a high number of our students that are Pell eligible. And I think I'm in the process of applying for a grant. So I have a number of this information right off the top of my head, but of 30,000 students, almost 10,000 of them are Pell eligible. So, all right, well, it is noon. So this was super helpful. We have a little bit of a break in terms of the next and final day of our institute will be next week. It's Tuesday, May 25th from 10 to noon. As I shared, we'll have our student panel on that day, and also some really great topics, some of which we've not yet talked about, but related to housing, which has been a big concern for a number of our students. And then also looking at special populations. We have found that a number of our Students that are impacted by the system also have many other identities, veteran, trans. And so we were looking at wanting to get more information about looking at that there's so many things that are impacting what's happening. Yeah, homeless, like a whole bunch of different identities that seem to go in and be a part of when you're working with students that have been impacted by the system. So those were some of the topics that we will be talking about next week. So again, I want to really thank all of our presenters. You've been most helpful. I've got so many notes from these first 2 days, and we're really looking forward to next week. So we'll see everyone on the 25th.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good week.
Thank you for hosting us.